If you can tell me the difference between a 3 and a 4 on a call recording scorecard, boy, I got some oceanfront property to sell you in Arizona. Hey everybody, I'm Cory Bray, one of the co-founders of ClozeLoop. I've also written 8 sales books, and I'm passionate about helping B2B sales teams grow, fix the problems they've got, figure out what's around the corner. And like everybody out there, we've been working on AI a lot recently. So after having a services business for 8 years, we've pivoted hard into technology. And so what we've been doing is taking all of the frameworks and concepts and trainings and methodologies that we've developed that we're deploying as services and consulting and augmenting it with tech. And that's what we've been doing at a super high level. And we can dig into it.
Yeah, so walk me through.
Well, I think the challenge was, if we look at pre-2020, sales enablement was this thing that was kind of new. And companies would have a sales enablement person and they'd plug them in and they'd work on a project. And it might be, oh, we got to work on new hire onboarding this quarter. And next quarter, we might need to work on demos. And the next quarter, we might need to work on manager development. So it's this thing where it just happens sequentially. And some work gets done on a topic and then they move on to the next thing and then they move on to the next thing. And then it was interesting because when interest rates go to zero, technology sector booms, all of a sudden you've got these companies that have, it was like, one of my interns was like, I know I've made it when my intern has an intern. And it was like, oh, my sales enablement associate has a sales enablement associate. And you've got this whole world of people that are there trying to support the team. The team's growing like crazy, revenue's coming in like nuts, and growth's just out of control. And then the music stops. And we go into 2023 and we're like, okay, things are hard again. How do we solve this? Well, back to the basics. Let's identify where our challenges are and start to fix them. But you had a lot of folks that came in these sales enablement roles that lived in the good times. And they weren't necessarily analytically focused on identifying and solving acute problems. And a lot of them hadn't even seen problems because things were so good for so long. Couple that with the fact that competition's fierce. And there's companies that are getting pushed out of markets left and right, as what used to be things that were hard to do are now fairly simple. You got companies out there that raised $500 million to do things like forecasting. Well, forecasting is 4th grade math that combined with AI isn't that hard to do anymore. Content creation, words, not that hard to write anymore. So the new world. So the thing that we're focused on is, how do we take all the hard things that need to be done and remove as much of the manual effort as possible from them while still applying human oversight. So technology first, human in the loop. And here's how that manifests itself. You're bringing new people into the company. They need to know things. They need to be able to do things. So how do we equip them with the knowledge and the skill and the mindset that they need to be successful? Well, in the past, you'd go on this big project and say, let's go build an onboarding program. Well, the onboarding program consists of 2 things. Things that everybody in the world knows, industry, market, stuff that's out there, outside of the walls of the company. And there's things that are inside of the walls of the company. They're trade secrets, specific things that others don't know, maybe their customers do. That outside the wall stuff is a complete commodity right now. And you can whip up a new hire training program in an hour, and it's not that hard. Oh, and by the way, you can make quiz questions and certifications. So that thing that used to take weeks, if not months, to put together, part of it now can be done with a few clicks of mouse. And then with the internal stuff, a lot of it's already documented. So how do we suck in the information from the docs and the decks and all of those types of things? How do we conduct interviews? And we've got transcripts. Pull all that information in and say, okay, well, let's combine the outside the wall stuff, the industry specific knowledge, with what the company needs people to know. And all of a sudden, we've got a pretty killer new hire ramp program. Oh, and instead of doing one silly role play to certify them, you can do unlimited, because you can say, hey, AI, take that certification and create a different version of it. And now let's recertify them. Oh, and by the way, let's not just do it in practice or for pretend. Let's augment it with some call recording analysis. Because when people do things, they either do them well, or they do them well under pressure. And you cannot gauge do that well under pressure unless we've got a view of what they're actually doing with their most important prospects. And so we're bringing somebody in the organization. It doesn't just stop at, oh, they went through the program. It doesn't just stop at, they did one role play with management. No, let's continuously review that. Everybody's calls are recorded now. So let's take all of that and let's do something with it. Let's build a rubric for the person, not for the company, not for the team, but for the individual person, and say, what does this person need to do in the call? And it's not one of these silly 1 out of 5 rubrics that apparently the call recording companies that don't know anything about sales coaching build. No, it's scale 3, 0, 1, 2. Didn't do it, did it well. That's it. Because if you can tell me the difference between a 3 and a 4 on a call recording scorecard, boy, I got some oceanfront property to sell you in Arizona. So the goal here is we're bringing people in the organization, we're getting them up to speed, we're making sure they know what they need to do, they got the mindset they need to do the job, and then we're able to inspect them, and they can even coach themselves. It's not about Big Brother looking down on them. It's about I'm an individual and I can go back and watch game tape. Every great athlete in the history of the world, other than probably John Daly, watches game tape and really studies what did they do well, where were their challenges, how can they get better. Well, we can enable folks to do that. And then, by the way, let's go get some more practice doing it. AI role play. Again, not hard. Build those things in 5 minutes, have a live conversation back and forth with somebody. And so I think that's the broad idea of how do we take these things that used to be quarter long or half year long sequential individual sales enablement projects and let a company execute all of them at once, put them in place, continuously improve, so you can bring people into the organization either externally, you can promote them internally, you can get them up to speed, you can continuously inspect and improve what they're doing, you can set those great people up for success to hit their numbers, to get promoted into enterprise, to become managers. And the folks that aren't going to make it, well, we can work them out in a fair way because there's a really good feedback loop, and so they don't feel like they're being treated unfairly because it's like they say in basketball, the ball don't lie. If you can't do it, let's recognize that we can't do it and move on. So that's
So I think that you mentioned two buckets, internal and external data with sales enablement, but there's almost a third bucket bridging internal and external, right? Like especially for role plays, you could learn medic externally, but you could see the nuance of that in the sales process and how the best reps are doing it from internal data, right? Like and theoretically you could see best practices from other teams perhaps a little bit externally. Some of it's shared anecdotally or better. How do you operationalize each of those buckets, those three buckets? And then the follow up is how are you measuring success?
Well, let's start with the second question. So if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. That's my favorite quotes from Yogi Berra back in the 50s. And the key with how do you measure success, I think this is where a lot of people get lost, is they say, oh, what's that? What's the metric that I need to measure? I don't know. What's your business? Where are you at today? And that's where it starts with an assessment of where are we at today? Where do we need to go? What do we need to do to get there? And what needs to change in order for us to do that? And so for different companies, it might be different things. For certain companies, it might be we need to increase our win rate. For certain companies, it might be we need to increase our deal size. For some companies, it might be we need to shorten our sales cycle. For some companies, we might need to increase the prospecting volume in order to bring more leads. And so I hate saying it depends because everything depends, but the thing that you're measuring needs to be tied to the thing that you need as an organization to get to the next milestone. And you got to work back from that. And then that's where all the work needs to be focused. And then once you get to that next gate, that next milestone, reevaluate and do another assessment. Because again, in the world that we live in today, doing these assessments is not that hard. We can do written assessments, we can do assessments of what's going on, and then we can obviously do the quantitative assessments, pulling data out of CRM and other places. So I think that's the how do you measure it and what's quantitative success look like in terms of bridging the external, the internal, and the hybrid of the two. I'd argue that learning from your best people is icing on the cake. It's something that you can take what that person does really well and try to incorporate it into the rest of the team. But if you try to get everybody to be like the best person, it's going to be really hard because they don't have the years behind them, maybe the natural ability, maybe the cognitive ability to be able to do some of those things. And I think that's one of the challenges when good sales reps get into management. They want everybody to be like them, and you can't flip a switch and make that happen. So the question isn't how do you build a superstar person, it's how do you build a superstar team? And it starts with the fundamentals of really defining what are all the things that somebody needs to know, what do they need to do, and what mindset do they need to have to support this in order to be successful at an acceptable baseline at a level that is above average. And then finally, as you work towards best in class, and yeah, we can pick and choose things that we observe internally or externally. And I'd argue that in B2B sales, the fundamentals aren't really unique to any internal organization. If you're doing a similar size ticket item into a similar size market segment, selling to a similar persona, it's changing vocabulary as you go from company to company 95% of the time.
So how are you operationalizing the baseline learnings from each bucket and then adding empowerment on top to take that and let the reps add whatever nuance they work best with and and one, how do they work best with it? Or two, like if they're newer, how can you help them figure it out? Like with that?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's what one thing that we learned a long time ago that I think I disagree with a lot of people's approach, especially the technology vendors out there, which is you have to be opinionated to a certain extent. And so there's this idea that dates back to the beginning of the software platform era, which is have an unopinionated product that people can do whatever they want with. So you have a Microsoft Excel, you can make it whatever you want. You don't have to make your models like this. You can make your models however you want. And I think that got into the world of B2B tech, including sales tech. For example, you buy a, I don't know, learning management system, AI, role play system, whatever it is, get started, right? I think we started thinking about this when it came to playbooks, where, okay, to have a good sales playbook, you should define target market and personas and competition and customer stories. And there's a good diagram that we can use to start with that. And we can put something on top of it. But for competitors, where do you win? Where do you battle? Where do you lose? For your target market, what's ideal? What's good? What's rejected? Not just a sentence that says this is our ICP. Because if you give a salesperson a sentence and says this is your ideal customer, and they have something that maybe they kind of think looks like that, they're going to be confused, and you're going to tell them it's not. They're going to see that as not fair, and then this exchange just breaks down. So I think having an opinionated framework across things like target market, or objection handling, or what is pain versus what is not pain, and how do we set up pain-based discovery questions where we're
How do
positioned.
you create how do you create that opinionated framework? Like
That's
how do you actually do it
Yeah, so that's what
and operationalize it? Yeah.
yeah, so I wrote, like I said earlier, I wrote 8 books on this. One of the books was Sales Playbooks Builder's Toolkit, and so then we took that and put it into ClozeLoop.ai. So when we bring,
Yeah, 2026, April. How are you doing it? Are you throwing everything into Claude? Are you creating a context graph that best helps understand the actual nuance? Because we have more data at our fingertips now than ever, and like some of those, not everything is data, but like we're able to pinpoint far more than we ever have.
yeah, totally. When we set up, we'll just talk about the playbook for a second. When we set up a new playbook for a customer, we draft it in AI and take their domain, scrape the web for what market do they compete in, what personas do they sell to, what are their customer stories, because they're on their website, they're also on third party sites and things like that. Start seeding things, because when it comes to things like playbooks or enablement programs or onboarding learning paths, anything like that, the biggest enemy is the blank piece of paper. And the thing that AI has given us is the ability to move past that blank piece of paper that you can't iterate on, and it gives us something that we can iterate on. So if I take something that AI has drafted based on what's out there in the world, and I give it to an executive, they can easily look at it and say, that's right, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's right, that's wrong, that's wrong. So it speeds up the process so fast by allowing for that human to react to something, instead of this paralyzing project of here's a blank document, fill it out.
Are you adding in any other data points outside of their website? Because let's be honest, a lot of companies' websites say the same thing even when they do something different. There's a
Yeah,
lot of like I'm AI for GTM. I'm not even kidding you. There are multiple sites that say that. How does that enable anybody? Are you bringing in call recordings at that point as well and saying like, hey, we weighted your website at this, weighted your call recordings actually as higher because like this is what's actually happening, what actually is being said. We're bringing your pipeline information in at Go to understand between what actually is being said to what's actually closing, making some very educated assumptions there, et
yeah,
cetera.
for sure. So yes, and so at the baseline, the nice thing is, like, the models have gotten so good at reasoning and inference now, they can read around a lot of those things. Like what you just described, like if you gave that to, OpenAI 3.5, it would just do exactly what you said. Be like, AI for GTM, this is what we do, right? But if you give it to 4.1 or Opus 4.6, it's going to have a much more broader context and understanding, and be like, okay, I can pick this nuance out, because I'm not just looking at your website and reading it. I'm looking at your domain, and I'm understanding how you fit in the world out there. And we come back with things, and then absolutely take the call recordings and beef it up. And the cool thing about that is it's limitless. It's not like you can only use three. Let's go through 50 of these and see what people are saying about us. I've got one prompt in our call recording. I was just looking at, pulls 110 data points from each call. It's wild. Now we don't surface all of those to the end user, but we have those. And so there's things that a user can look at the call level, and then there's something that we can look at kind of at the, call it like the intermediate period, like the month level. And then we got something that's on the longer term level, and we can start looking at trends across stages, people, teams, managers, etc. And it's so cheap to do all of this. It's wild.
What's the most, so like you have 100 plus data points. just using like Pareto's law, 20% of them probably matter 80% of the weight, right? Like, can you share some of those like top
Yeah.
20% data points that
The top,
like drive the most?
yeah,
Yeah.
the top ones that drive the most are adherence to sales methodology. And so, obviously we use triangle selling as our sales methodology that we roll to all of our customers. And the key is, did you do plan? Did you pivot into the meeting? Did you uncover logistics around who's going to be there and how much time you have? Did you get their agenda? Did we get our agenda? Did we get permission to ask questions? Did we preview next steps? Did we do that well? Did we look for pain? When we found pain, was it actually pain or was it just inefficiency or cost? And when we found it, did we dig a little deeper? And then towards the end of the meeting, velocity plan, same thing. Did we hit the P, the L, the A, the N? And then if we're sharing our screen, did we hit the components of the share framework that drives to a compelling demo, especially acutely focused on the pain and asking engaging questions? So sales methodology adherence to, let's call it the most important things to start. And then if people are nailing all of those, then we can start going into some of those more nuanced, longer tail things, because it gives the managers an opportunity to coach the best person, which I've always struggled with because coaching energy gets directed down towards the lower end of the spectrum. Well, when you can actually look at more things more robustly and you don't have to be the one sitting there trying to manually take stuff out of one format and put it into a spreadsheet and then make pivot tables, but it just presents it to you, you're like, holy cow, I now understand how I'm going to coach this top performer and I'm going to get them from 130% to 150%.
Got it. And then are you feeding this into AI role plays
Yeah.
to help enable them?
Yeah. So we have a role play product that you can then kind of run it back. So, hey, things happen on the call. Let's go practice this, or let's design a combination of things that we observe. And so we can get people practicing things before they blow it with their biggest prospect ever and end up missing their quota and get fired. Like, don't do that. You have the opportunity to do this. Go do it.
How often do you think a leader needs to make sure their reps are doing role plays and like for an A rep, a B rep, a C rep?
Yeah. Well, if people are consistently demonstrating that they've got it dialed in, they look, people, especially people that have been doing it for a long time, they're not going to do role plays. They're just not going to use it. They're not going to do it. You can ask them to, but that's one case. I think the good case for role plays are you got new hires, you got people moving into new roles, you've got new product launches, you've got post M&A integration. Like those are phenomenal use cases that are good for anybody that's in one of those positions. Or hey, we're getting smoked by this competitor because they just launched something new and they're eating our lunch. I think those are good things. But look, I mean, you got Allen Iverson, you got Michael Jordan. Like Allen Iverson didn't want to practice. He's talking about practice, right? And then you got people, Kobe sitting in the gym all day, every day, and he was incrementally better than Iverson, but Iverson's still probably like top 20 player of all time, arguably, maybe 30. But so yeah, I think it's a function of giving the managers tools so then they can direct enablement activity. Because what happens is sales enablement says, go do this. People aren't going to do it. It just doesn't happen. Like sometimes, sure, maybe BDRs, yeah, whatever. But like, show me a rep with gray hair that sales enablement says, I'm assigning you something. They're like, okay, cool. I'm excited about this. It's not the reality. But what the reality is that if we can empower the managers to have that quick access to go do something, to build, deploy, and inspect rapidly, then it becomes more of a reality. And that's what we've been seeing recently.
What are you seeing with the shift of like enablement pre AI to enablement post? Like the successes and like the team size requirement to make that happen,
Yeah.
assuming that they have like an in-house team.
Well, pre-AI, they're bandwidth constrained because certain things just take lots of man hours. And I mean, call reviews take lots of man hours. Building programs takes lots of man hours. Running interviews and collecting information and aggregating and presenting, making PowerPoint presentations takes lots of man hours. So I think that was the constraint pre-AI. I think the constraint post-AI is around, a couple of things that aren't the focus of the role traditionally, which are analytical skills and project management. I think those are, when it comes to enablement, the two most important skills are analytical skills and project management. From an analytical standpoint, can we diagnose what our problems are? Can we stack rank those problems? Can we go get some quick wins while also chipping away at some of the long-term opportunities? And
What
no, go ahead.
what's the future of sales enablement? Like it's a question that enablement professionals that are like having a difficult time in their roles or finding a role because they find themselves out of roles. Like what's the future look like? Can't any operations person figure this out with like a game plan?
Yeah, it's harder. harder to justify more headcount for this role. I think the key is, and that's the second point I was making, which is around project management, which is how do we make this stuff actually work? So we go build something. It's the W. Edwards Deming, my favorite statistician and thinker around manufacturing. His framework was plan, do, check, act. So we got to plan, we got to do it, we got to check our work, and we got to act. Traditionally, enablement's pretty much lived in that plan world of, okay, we're going to go do this initiative, we're going to build it, and then, we're going to do it or oversee it or whatever. I think AI is so good at.
They vocally say they've been disconnected from revenue. And I'm like, that sounds dangerous for your career.
Yeah, totally. And you're disconnected from revenue. Revenue is your customer. If I'm disconnected from one of my customers, that tells me my customer is not getting value out of what I do objectively. So if enablement disconnected from revenue, then enablement not giving the amount of value for them to feel connected. Is the manager knocking on their door being, hey, I need help with this thing next? And if they're not, that's the problem.
And what results are you seeing on average, or in any cases that you have like an example, like a hard example of from like full enablement pre-AI, be 2023, 2024
Yeah.
to today?
Well, we got companies so pre-AI, when we would roll out triangle selling to teams, it would take, I don't know, a month from the time the contract signed for them to be up and running and really doing it. We have people the same day the contract signed using our frameworks in their meetings because they can get into the pre-work in our courses. They can start learning this stuff. They can get the quizzes done. They can start doing the role plays with the AI bots, and they can start working with their customers. And I'm not saying you should start doing it the first day. And that's scary to anybody. But day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, you're able to create AE ramp periods that look more like traditional BDR ramp periods. There is much more to know, much more to do, much more complexity on the AE side of the world. Traditionally, you can get a BDR cold calling on day 2, day 3, and it's no big deal. You can start getting an AE selling on day 2, day 3. Granted, they know how to sell. You don't want to pick somebody off the street, but
Assuming the same person, what was old ramp for each role? What's new ramp? And are you in weeks or months? And what percentage of folks are hitting goal and at what time period
well,
horizon?
in terms of ramp, I would say that, old world, you could get a BDR ramped in 60 days, simply. Now, like if they really get after it, like they could be crushing it in 2 weeks, like legit crushing, because you need to know some stuff. You need to do some stuff. You got all the tools to learn it, and you've got the ability to practice it asynchronously, and you don't have to sit around waiting for Bob to get out of the conference room. So I think on that front, it's super fast. And then on the AE side, you could start doing your first discovery meeting your second week of work. I can think of several clients that they've got people come in and they're doing discovery meetings with prospects second week. It's awesome.
Yeah, and how long is it taking the rep to hit quota, like on average? Like
Yeah.
assuming it's a quota hitting rep.
Yeah, the function there is how many leads do they have? So yeah, and I think that's the scary part about today, right? Is that it's harder to get people's attention. You got people blocking the phones. You got the emails aren't getting answered the way that they used to be. Marketing is more expensive. And so a lot of folks are walking in these roles and the pipeline's not there.
Is the right metric then sales enablement, or is it? And I got off a call yesterday where I had two calls recently with people that sell into the enterprise. And they said the new metric they're looking at, CRO level said this, was selling time per seller, like as a percentage of the week. And like the average is 20% on the high end right now. And they want to see if they can get to 50 or 75%, understanding that 100% is probably hard.
Yeah.
Like yesteryears,
Yeah.
admin, CRM, and maybe research took up like a lion's share of the corrupted selling time. That's minimized beyond belief. Now it's some like new things, so to speak, but like it also brings up a bigger point, like from a hiring perspective. Like, should you even hire somebody before you've optimized your one rep selling for 50% or more of their time?
Yeah. Well, I think you definitely shouldn't hire an expensive account executive and tell them go figure out how to get leads when you have marketing. I mean, this is the thing that just drives me nuts. It's like you've got a marketing department with like a VP of marketing and a director of marketing and an associate and an agency. You got that. Then you got a BDR team with a BDR manager. And then you go hire an AE, you're like, go find leads. Like, what the hell are those other people doing? I mean, yes, salespeople should prospect. I agree. However, what are those other people doing? That's odd. So, yeah, 50% is great. I think that the problem is like, once you get much over 50% of actual selling time, if we're talking sales is like scheduled meetings, not cold calling, it's hard because then you start having so many calendar conflicts, you can't keep velocity with your deals. Because if I've got a packed calendar, I have one client that just crushes trade shows, and they'll do a trade show and their AE's calendars will be blocked for 2 weeks afterwards. And then the BDR is like, I can't schedule a meeting with this person for 3 weeks. And then the prospect's upset, the BDR is upset, the AE's upset. Everybody's leaving money on the table.
Yeah, but you're still at that percent selling time for the seller. Like it still goes to that. That's a good thing for the org. They could figure out everything else.
I think if percent seller time's good, look at someone's calendar and look at the calendar and say, are you happy with that calendar? And it's like, yeah, calendar capacity, win rate, deal size.
Well, happy could be objective, right? Like happy could mean 50% or 75%. And then can enablement come in as well to somebody that has a packed calendar, they're already ramped, and figure out how to take less, assuming that they only have bandwidth for 50% because they have other things to do
yeah.
around that account. Can they create processes for those other things to do to shorten the time to that of research, right? Like I need to create a proposal. Great.
Yeah,
you have
sure. Absolutely.
all of these call notes. You're just going in your brain and thinking through it. We have it. We could have, something set up in Claude or something to like quicker operationalize a proposal. Proposals don't need to take that long if there's nothing that hasn't been recorded.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of my favorite use cases is my proposals take probably 1/5 as long as they used to because everything's spoken in the meeting. Yeah. Well, and then you're kind of touching on another point, which is the role, the swim lanes of enablement versus ops.
Mm-hmm.
I think traditionally what we'd seen was that the enablement role is less technical, the ops role is more technical. Ops has, they got all the API keys, they got all the tech vendors on their side. But if enablement's doesn't have some kind of authority over that, and the CRM's not set up great, or the proposals process isn't set up great, or RFPs or whatever it is, then you're kind of fighting against yourself internally.
You can't drive towards revenue. That's why I personally think the future of enablement is ops. And if you're not that ops person, we don't need any la-di-da. This is the new training. We're we know. We're telling the reps.
Yeah. Well, so that's another interesting one is what is ops, Because if you look outside of SaaS and companies that sit at their desks, ops is much bigger, and it's like operations of the business, and it's not necessarily like orchestrating some tech. So the question then becomes: is the person who orchestrates the tech best suited to be an employee, or is it best suited to be somebody that's like the best tech orchestrator around? It can be with the company for 10 years. Man, PO windows closed, private equity, companies are sticking around for longer and longer and longer. You got these companies that have been around, that are venture-backed companies that are 10, 12, 15, 18 years old now. How many operations people have they had? And what kind of hornet's nest gets created in a world where you've got Claude code running to create stuff every week? That's wild.
So the IPO window, I believe, is reopening, but it's not the same companies. You're going to see Anthropic IPO. You're going to see OpenAI IPO. I think Stripe will finally IPO. Canva will IPO. That's kind of like, but they're all building the new way and facilitating the new world, right?
Yeah. But the interesting thing about that is those are all companies that were founded in 2008, 2013. There's
not Anthropic.
Well,
not OpenAI.
OpenAI was 2014.
So Perplexity hit 9 figures in revenue with 5 GTM people. Do you think one of those people is an enablement person out of the 5?
No, absolutely not.
No chance.
No, because they have an awesome product. If you have an awesome product, the best enablement is a good product.
Fair.
Because I get you on the big behemoth, super fast companies probably being able to IPO. But I was reading something. I just looked it up from Sami Abdullah from Blossom Street Ventures. He wrote that there were about 80. He said 79 to 81 SaaS IPOs since 2017. That's wild. So 10 a year. And how many venture-funded SaaS companies are there? Lots. So, sure, we're going to get, SpaceX,
Yep.
maybe, but for the the run of the mill 50 million, 100 million, $200 million company, is there an opportunity to move, or are you going to be, you know, operating for much longer than they'd originally thought 10 years ago when they started this journey?
Or they might be acquired. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I appreciate your time, Corey. How can people get in touch with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, CoryBray.
This is great. Thank you so much, man.